is Audible.
Brilliance Audio.
Spellbound: Modern Science, Ancient Magic, and the Hidden Potential of the Unconscious Mind by Daniel Z. Lieberman, M.D. Performed by Tom Parks. For St. John's College, where the books of magic are read. Know thyself. Inscription on the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. Introduction: The Unconscious and the Supernatural. There's someone living in your head besides you. You think you're calling all the shots, that you're in charge of your thoughts, feelings, and choices. You're not. When it comes to how you think and feel your way through life, at best, you're the co-pilot. At worst, you're along for the ride, at the mercy of a part of your brain that's overwhelmingly powerful but entirely unseen, influential but utterly secret from you. It's called the unconscious, a vast collection of neural circuits working all the time, just out of sight, just out of mind. It determines whether you will be enthusiastic or bored, full of energy or barely able to keep your eyes open. It can make you compassionate or fill you with hatred. It chooses what you desire and who you fall in love with. It can solve seemingly impossible problems with the gift of inspiration, and sometimes it possesses you completely, plunging you into an alien world of mystical experience. What if we could learn how to recognize the influences of the unconscious and make it an ally in helping us become who we were meant to be? And what if the key to doing so was not modern science, but a book of fairy tales and a deck of tarot cards? Science and magic. The unconscious has played a prominent, though hidden role in human culture throughout history. The ancients sought to understand its influence through myths about supernatural creatures, gods, goddesses, demons, and spirits. This way of thinking has fallen out of favor, but the need to work with our dark twin who accompanies us through life is as important as ever. Our modern understanding of the mind comes from the disciplines of psychology and neuroscience. Because the brain is so much more complex than other organs, these sciences are still in their infancy, and their explanations work best when it comes to simple behaviors that can be tested in a laboratory. Although it may sound strange, a deeper, more sophisticated understanding of unconscious brain functioning can be obtained by combining these modern scientific discoveries with a psychological understanding gleaned from ancient myths. Drawing on the work of Swiss psychiatrist Carl Gustav C.G. Jung, best known for his theory of the collective unconscious, we can unite science and the supernatural to better understand the hidden part of our minds, to discover how it influences our behavior and how we can join forces with it to enrich our lives and make ourselves whole. Most people don't think about their unconscious mind very much. In fact, the biggest mistake people make is underestimating its importance. You may have seen pictures that illustrate the mind as an iceberg, with the vast majority, the unconscious, floating beneath the surface. The unconscious uses a much larger part of the brain than the conscious mind, and that's why it has such an oversized influence. It's also more primitive. It has its own way of processing information that's alien to conscious modes of thought. When the unconscious exerts its influence, it can feel like an external force is acting on us. It can throw us into a passion that takes over our behavior and makes us act in irrational, sometimes self-destructive ways. but it can also awaken latent abilities we never suspected we had. That's why the unconscious has historically been conceived as a supernatural force. It's both overwhelmingly powerful and utterly alien to conscious modes of thought. One of Jung's most important insights was that the best source of knowledge about the unconscious comes from ancient stories about the supernatural. Stories about magic. That's not easy to accept. We live in an age of scientific discovery, in which rational investigation into natural processes has banished the superstitions of previous generations in favor of an understanding that gives us unprecedented control over our environment. We no longer need sun gods, tree spirits, or personal demons to explain natural and psychological phenomena. Today, we confidently state that those explanations are of no use to us because they're false. And yet, we remain fascinated by ancient traditions of the supernatural. Some of today's most popular stories are about magic. Enthusiastic audiences pour into theaters to enter the worlds of Harry Potter, Middle-earth, and Marvel's superheroes. At first glance, it seems odd that magic and the supernatural are still so compelling, long after their descriptions of how the world works have been proven inaccurate. Disproved scientific theories, by contrast, rarely demonstrate this sort of persistence. Few people care about the Rutherford model of the atom, for example. But magic, discredited centuries ago, continues to hold us in its mysterious grip. The reason stories about magic fascinate us is that they reveal our inner world. The human brain is more than a rational thinking machine. It has darker corners that give rise to the irrational, things outside conscious control. The rational part of the brain uses language and logic to process experiences. But the irrational parts, which are generally hidden from us, don't think with language. They use symbolism that past centuries of thinkers have dubbed magic. The word magic can be used in various ways. The first thing that might come to mind is a stage performer pulling a rabbit out of a hat. But that's not really magic, it's just a trick. Alternatively, we might think of magic spells, flying carpets, or divination. We're getting closer, but to understand the hidden parts of the psyche, we have to go back to a more ancient form of magic, perhaps the most ancient form of all, communicating with otherworldly spirits and sometimes being possessed by them. A magic potion needs more than eye of newt and toe of frog. It must be invested with an invisible power before it can make someone fall in love or give them superhuman abilities. Something beyond the physical ingredients needs to be present, something that enters the one who drinks the potion and transforms him. Even an enchanted scroll needs to be inhabited by an invisible spirit before it can be more than parchment and ink. Magic occurs when the natural world is invaded and occupied by entities from the spirit world. We see this most clearly in ancient accounts of prophets, oracles, and priestesses who were thought to be portals through which the gods spoke. Sometimes they were believed to be under the direct control of supernatural entities. Ordinary people also experienced the influence of the gods. Roman soldiers charging into battle, heedless of their own safety, believed they were invested with courage by Mars, the god of war. Lovers experiencing the frenzy of erotic passion believed they were possessed by Venus, the goddess of love. Poets were inspired by the divine muses, and champions gave thanks to the goddess of victory for endowing them with the ability to win. There was widespread belief that invisible entities could occupy the minds of mortals to impose their will on humankind. The ancients attributed these experiences to supernatural creatures because it felt as if something outside themselves was responsible for the things they did. Love comes unbidden. It can't be summoned at will. The same is true of poetic inspiration. The ancients reasoned that when they achieved something beyond their usual abilities, taking credit for it themselves made no sense. It came from outside, sometimes as a blessing, and sometimes as a curse. Today, we no longer believe in the pervasive influence of supernatural entities. We credit ourselves with having exclusive control over what goes on inside our heads. We tend to think that if we want to change our behavior, all we have to do is put our mind to it. Self-help books feature 10 easy steps to achieve discipline, confidence, and success. Do they work? If they did, we'd all be skinny, rich, happy, and kind. The idea that we can take control over our emotions and summon abilities that lie dormant within us doesn't hold up to the cold light of reality. Despite the progress we've made since science and technology replaced belief in magic, we remain at the mercy of forces beyond our control. Why do we act in self-destructive ways? Why do we do things knowing full well that in a week, a day, maybe even an hour, we'll regret it? What is the source of our mental energy? Where does inspiration come from? Contemporary research tells us that there are some circuits in the brain we're aware of and others that we're not. Those we're aware of we can control. The ones we're not control us. They are the gods within. That gives us two ways of understanding the human condition: supernatural and scientific. The supernatural approach attributes irrational behaviors to the influence of magical creatures, the spirits and demons of ancient stories. When we're overcome with rage, we feel as if we're no longer in control of our own behavior. We burn bridges, insult those we love, sometimes even smash prized possessions. Later, we might say, "I don't know what possessed me to do that." The ancient belief that humans are liable to be taken over by invisible forces is embedded in our very language. The scientific approach is different. It explains human behavior through neurochemical activity, the actions of proteins, monoamines, and phospholipids. Although this explanation can be understood only by specialists, and even they understand it poorly, we tend to accept the scientific explanation as the only one that's useful. That's a mistake. To fully understand the human condition, we need both. The ancient and the modern. Many phenomena can be understood from more than one perspective. Matter is one example. In 1927, English